And now, a thought from man. It's amazing how well Season 5 of Samurai Jack managed to be. Honestly, it's surprising to think that they could come back after so long and still make a great continuation, and honestly, sort of a nice mini-series when you really get down to it. This was something that anybody could watch. They wouldn't have to watch the original seasons. They could just literally tune into this and just watch this. I find that kind of amazing, and it worked as a very nice evolution too for old fans. It was such a nice way to not only evolve a series, but to also finish it. Season 5 was very different from the original episodes of Samurai Jack. The first 4 seasons, a lot of the episodes didn't really connect to each other. What happens in one episode normally doesn't affect what happens in the next episode. This season, they decided to go for a more serialization of it, and all the episodes now actually have an arc. Every episode basically connects to the last. And that's honestly for the better. I like that it's basically telling you this story. It gives Jack more of an arc. And Jack's main arc for this season is redemption. He's taken so long to defeat Aku. It's been 50 years and yet he still hasn't come close to defeating Aku. He lost the one weapon that could defeat him, and now all he does is roam around helping people whenever he can. He's basically stepped off of his own path that he was on. But he managed to redeem himself and get back to basics and finally defeat this great evil that is Aku. He had major personal problems this season too, even going as far as contemplating suicide because it would be so much easier to just give up on life and just let Aku win. But he came to realize, no, I gotta stop this. I made a promise and I have to live up to it. And honestly, the season plays out exactly how you think it should. It lets him redeem himself, and he does return to his former glory. And honestly, I really like that this season was able to do that. This season ultimately managed to evolve him and let him be something that we just haven't seen before. And I really say kudos for that. Jack doesn't go through this evolution by himself. He ends up meeting a woman named Ashi, who's one of the 7 daughters of Aku. She was brainwashed into believing Aku was the great savior of this land, and the samurai was the great evil. But Jack managed to show her that no, Aku is the great evil. He's the one who's destroyed all these lives and caused such great devastation. He managed to mainly show her after he slaughtered all of her sisters because, you know, fuck siblings. She just went along with everything even though he slaughtered all of her sisters. But you understand why she still went along with him, because they were trained not to give a shit for each other. If one of you fails, that's on them. They should have been stronger. And it's honestly amazing how she herself has her own arc. It's very interesting. And it's pretty dark too. Like, they take advantage of the fact that this show was on Adult Swim. Because what they do to Ashi as a kid, you're just like, oh no, that poor baby, no. Ugh, it's harsh.
Teach this one a lesson.
But she looks past it and manages to do the right thing, and she joins up with Jack. She's the one who ultimately convinces him that he needs to come back, because she manages to see all the good that he has done. All the people whose lives he managed to change or save.
Aku enslaved the children with his beats from hell. But then he came and fought an evil way. It was the samurai.
And it was mainly because of her that he managed to get back on the righteous path. And then there's another great thing about her is that she is a badass. There is no damsel in distress for this woman. She is just pure badass. This season managed to become a lot harsher than most other seasons of Samurai Jack. And that's mainly because the first 4 seasons were on Cartoon Network, whereas this one was on Adult Swim. So they really didn't have to hold back what they wanted to do. And I tell you now, they really don't hold back. In the first few seasons, Jack was mainly killing robots. He would slice them up and destroy those things, and as a funny effect, he'd be covering oil. But in this one, they're like, no, he doesn't hold back. He'll now kill actual people. The first person he kills is actually one of the sisters of Ashi. And you're just thinking, damn, that's kind of fucked up. He even wonders, is this right? He ultimately comes to the decision, yeah, I gotta do this. It's to defend my own life. I have to do this. If I don't, I die. This season really shows how harsh it can be, especially with Ashi when they show off what that black suit on her really is.
We too must become one with it. We are forever grateful and ever in your service.
That really did work best with the show because it came out some years later and a lot of the people who grew up on Samurai Jack are now adults. So a lot of us would want to see the show become a bit harsher. And it did in a nice way. It didn't make itself all dark and gritty. It just upped the ante in terms of its violence. And even then, it didn't overstay its welcome with how violent it could be. They knew not to make it an absolute gore fest because otherwise that'd just be kind of boring or stupid and it wouldn't really fit with Samurai Jack because Jack wasn't about gore. It was about a samurai seeking to return to the past and correct the future while destroying a few enemies in the way. The violence they have is just tastefully done and I really appreciate how they were able to do that with this season.
Thank you.
One other thing about this season is that it still manages to be pretty funny. They have dark, serious moments, but they still get some good comedy in. A lot of the comedy they end up having is mainly from Aku, because he's at the point of just being bored with himself. It's like, well, the samurai hasn't come after me in like 50 years, and I've destroyed all the ways for him to get back to the past, so what else is there to do? He's basically just at that point of a midlife crisis. He just doesn't know what to do with himself. And it's just kind of funny. He's basically talking to himself, having a therapy session with himself. It's just kind of funny because he was such a major threat, and it's like, this is the great devastator of the future? Holy crap, what happened? That doesn't mean he still can't be a threat. He completely wipes out an entire army without really trying. And he destroys a fan favorite character, the Scotsman, without really much hesitation. He just looks at him and I-beams him to death. And it's like, wow, just didn't even think about it. It's just funny how they managed to put in a lot of lighthearted humor into this, considering all the stuff that has been going on. I just like how they managed to blend it, because that was what Samurai Jack could do. It managed to blend seriousness with comedy. And this was no exception. It still managed to do that just nicely.
You've been shivering like a wee baby hiding in your crib, afraid to show yourself because you know he's out there, and you can't do anything about it. You're just a big baby. Why did you go cry to your mama?
The animation was outright working overtime this time around. I mean, Samurai Jack was known for having great visuals to kind of complement the story, but this time around, the visuals are just amazing. They're just gorgeous. It's just so amazing to look at them. Like, the thing about Samurai Jack was that it was supposed to be a very silent type of show. A lot of the time they would just let the animation speak for itself. They wouldn't have a lot of dialogue. This season managed to up the ante. They utilized their color palettes. They have such amazing background work. It's just gorgeous. Honestly, I could just look at this all day. It's amazing how well they managed to do things and take this series to such a new level. I really like how they managed to do that with this.
Yes.
A lot of people end up having a bit of a problem with the series finale, but I kinda don't get it. The main premise of the series finale is that Aku managed to capture Jack and get him away from his sword after he took over Ashi, which was kinda expected because she's one of the 7 daughters of Aku. She has his essence, so he manages to control her and make her his obedient servant. Aku decides to livestream the entire event, and the people that see it are people who were affected by Jack, whose lives they were changed by Jack. So they all decide, we're gonna return the favor and come save you. Everybody comes in and saves the day. They fight off Aku, but he's clearly much stronger than all of them. But they manage to save Jack, and then Jack decides he needs to save Ashi. He manages to save her, and the thing is, she ends up retaining the powers that Aku gave to her when he took her over, which means she ended up having the power to send Jack back in time. So they go back in time to when Aku first threw Jack into the future, and Jack kills Aku, finally ending his reign of evil. Jack manages to return to his old life with Ashi by his side, but there's a sad twist. Because she was from the future, that means she has to disappear because the future that existed only existed because of Aku and what he did. But since he's gone, she now has to go into oblivion. And the main episode ultimately ends with Jack just standing on a hill looking out into the horizon with a bright sunset. He's ultimately happy that he managed to change so many people's lives, even though it was sort of for naught. He managed to be the great hero. And a lot of people tend to have a problem with this episode, but I think it's just a perfect fitting for this series. I think it works as a great ending. I can admit it could have benefited from being longer, like it could have been a whole hour-long series finale, but for what we got, I say it's still great. Honestly, it's just a nice way to end everything, because we've waited for so long. At this point, it's like, do you really want it to drag out? Also, if you feel like you want more out of the series, well, think about it for a minute. Is it better that they leave you absolutely dissatisfied versus leaving you wanting more? I mean, with something dissatisfying, you're gonna be angry most of the time at how it ends. Whereas here, it's like, it manages to leave you a bit with some satisfaction that it's finally over. You might say you wanted a little more out of it, but it does end everything. It finally decides to stop. So I would say that's sort of a mission accomplished. And just as well, there really was no other route they could have gone with this. They clearly couldn't go the route of Ashi staying alive. That just wouldn't make sense in terms of time travel. It couldn't make sense if they kept him in the future, because it's like, doesn't that destroy your whole gotta get back to the past Samurai Jack thing? This was just a great way to finally end off such a great series after so many years of waiting. And I say we should just be happy with that. Season 5 was honestly a great way to finally end off this series. It worked as a great continuation and a great finale. And at the same time, it worked as a mini-series. And I just don't think that's something a lot of series can do. This was something that literally anybody could come in and watch. If you didn't watch the first 4 seasons, then you still wouldn't be lost, because it manages to keep you up to date with everything that you need to know. They have a whole episode dedicated to just being basically about fan service, but at the same time, it manages to catch up newcomers, to those that wonder, what has Jack done to make him so great? You see all the people he's affected, all the people whose lives he saved, and you realize, oh, that's why people like him. That's why people call him like the great hope of everything. And I just find it so amazing that this could do that in just 1 season. Like, it manages to tell the entire story of the series just in these 10 episodes. Samurai Jack was just an animation legend. It deserves to be held in the highest regards. It should be studied in every animation class, and it's just such an amazing series. And it's surprising that this came from Cartoon Network and then eventually to Adult Swim, oddly enough. But either way, it's still such an amazing piece of animation. And I'm so happy that I managed to grow up with this series. It managed to grow up with me. It evolved like I did. And I just find it so amazing that it was able to pull that off. And I'm just so happy that it managed to finally have its closure. And I thank Genndy Tartakovsky for making such an amazing series. But that's just a thought.
Have no